51 years later, here we are, making sure that another 51 years don't go by and we are back in this same position. What are Blacks so unhappy about? Here to help us engage with some of these issues today and to answer some of the questions or at least engage with members of our community are Holmes and DeJuana Warren-Bigelow, two activists from the Burlington, North Carolina area who are now quite well known in our community, if they weren't before, for the way that they organize the Black Lives Matter protests in our city early in the spring following the death that we all watched on television of George Floyd in Minneapolis. We also have the Burlington Police Chief, Jeff Smythe, along with the City Manager, Hardin Watkins, and our Mayor Pro Tem, Hykes. Welcome all of you to the CoRE and for agreeing to speak with us. And I would like to start with each of you, perhaps talking a bit about, in your perspective, why are we here? Where does Burlington stand? And what, in your view, needs to happen? What are some of the things that we need to address? Mon, welcome. Good to see you, meet you for the first time. And I'm going to start with you and just tell us a little bit about what drove you and DeJuana to organize the protests in Burlington.
Well, it started off with a conversation with my son one night. He was, my son is 16. I have two sons. I have a 22-year-old and I have a 16-year-old. And the 16-year-old was voicing his concerns one night about the march and me getting involved in the community and with everything that was going on. And he told me how he's seen things going and how worried he was for me and everything. So it was kind of a shock to me to see that my 16-year-old son was weighing on him the way it was, was weighing on him the way it was, and for him to have the feeling. So that kind of solidified what I needed to do as far as taking action during this time, because right now we have so much time between people not being able to work, kids not being able to go to school, social media driving everything. We have so much time to take in either the wrong information or something it's the information that we're not getting that's not good for us, that's I think is dividing us so much, because we're getting it from a lot of entities, people, friends, different news groups, different Facebook posts. So he was getting that and he voiced his concern. And my son is 16 years old and he has a heart of gold, I would like to think, and it kind of woke in me in a way that, if a 16-year-old kid, a young man is feeling this way, then it's others like that feels like this. So it was me, that was my awakening as far as doing that. I had already seen it, as far as with America and with our local, with everything local, that, it was, we needed leadership. We needed leadership in Burlington. We needed someone, instead of someone, we're playing into the narrative that it was with the division and with we're not being friendly with the police. We're not having open dialogue with the police and our councilmen and everything like that. We needed that, and we were going in the wrong way. To me, we were going in the wrong way with how everything was shaping with the violent protests. Being seen and not heard, us conveying the message in a different way, but still having that message, still having that urgency and that passion to get the message across, but not in a different way. I was hurt and I was upset too, when I seen Mr. Floyd die. I was upset when Trayvon, you know, I felt the same way when Trayvon died. I felt the same way when Mr. Grant died. I felt the same way when Miss Bland died, you know, but my son solidified it with me. You know, that conversation with my son it stirred me in a way, and it kind of awoke in me in a way that, you know, if my 16-year-old son is feeling like this, then I know it's plenty of other individuals and kids like him that feel that way, and that, you know, we needed to be heard. We need to be seen, but I wanted to do it in a different way, a peaceful way. And it was just that I just wanted to change the narrative at that time where we were going, because we were seeing a lot of violent protests at the time. Just seeing a lot of violent protests at the time. And I just wanted to change the dialogue. And my son helped me out with that. And Miss DeJuana, I call her my sister now, and she helped me out with it a lot. You know, I figuring out a lot of things that was stirring in me, that I was seeing in the community, because I live in the country. You got to understand, I went to Southern Alamance High School. That's a predominantly white school and this is in the heart of what's going on in Alamance County now, that near that high school. But I lived in Sharp Road. I grew up in Crump Village. I know it's kind of strange. I went to Southern Alamance. They paid my tuition to go to that school, but I was engulfed in a lot. I've lived in somewhat the hood, but I was around kids, country. I was in the country. You know, I was around kids that farmed, that drove pickup trucks, that, you know, that, and so my idea of people was formed and shaped of no color, no social, no, it was no economic. I was out, you know, I lived in two different areas. Like I was friends with everyone. I've never had a color issue or anything like that. But now it was getting to the point where it was almost people were like choosing sides, you know, and I don't like that. I don't like that at all. I have a lot of friends that black and white. My family's black, but my kids are mixed. I have people that I call my brothers that are white, and it's painful. It's painful to see where we're at as a nation, but especially as a community. Because I like I said, I grew up in Graham and Burlington, and I seen the bad and the good, you know, out of it. I know what racism is. I know what bigotry is. I know what hate is. But you were always taught to turn the other cheek. You were always taught to, not taught, but it was never put on you to, well, it's just the way it is. It's just the way it is. That's just how it is. Stay away from it. Stay out of their way. They'll stay away from you, and that's the way it is. Mm-hmm. And I would come home. I would go to school, and we had this thing called Redneck Ramp at Southern Alamance High School. That's crazy. But I seen that, and then I would come home, and I would go, and I live in a park. I would live in a project. So we, you know, and my idea things would never cross. I just had a good round, you know, I was rounded in a different way, because I seen a lot, but I was raised not to judge. I was raised not to have an open mind. Give the person the benefit of the doubt before you judge them just because of anything. But I just seen the way things were. And I think that we can do better as a society. And I think Alamance County, Burlington, Graham is better than what it is highlighting. From to where it is now, and the individuals that I know and that I grew up with, and that I know that we can be better. I know that we can do better, and I know that this city and this county is a whole lot better than it is right now. I really do. I really do.
Thank you for those opening remarks, and I'm sure that we have questions for you. I certainly have questions for you, but I want to get to the other panelists, yes. And I'm going to ask DeJuana to jump in, and the same thing. What inspired you to organize and to rise to this role of community activist and leader in your community?
For me, what brought me to looking at the issues in the community was just as a citizen, as a resident, when issues come up and you are aware of those things, the first thing is being aware. After you're aware, my natural instinct is to want to do something. How do we fix it? Where do we go? So that's been me forever, way before I even knew about activism, about leadership, and even wanting to pursue community work. Is just a passion of mine, is to know when there is a problem. I'm a fixer. I take pride in loving to fix. I love to, that's just one of my natural talents, is fixing. I love people for the most part. I would say I'm a very people's person. And that's the main thing. When it came down to the activism part is in Alamance County, is that when I looked around at these issues, I didn't see anyone really like me fighting. I didn't see anybody coming to save the people who could not speak and didn't actually know how to voice their opinions, but they had issues and they had problems, but they didn't know how to move forward. And it was nobody coming around to even show the people. Even growing up, I grew up on Key Street for the most part of my life, Jackson Park, right there on the corner of Raw Hut and Key, up on the hill is where I grew up at. And there was no one doing what we're doing now. There was no one identifying. And even though I was young, I still knew somebody's supposed to be doing something. And I knew that with my personality and how I felt and the way issues touched me, and the change that I wanted to see, I can say now that I knew I would end here. It bothers me tremendously to know that there are people in our community that are ostracized. Their voice does not matter. Their voice does not matter. Their issues do not matter. They feel stuck. They feel hopeless. And I know without a shadow of a doubt, there's a way. And so that's what brought me into community. I would actually say community chose me. I'm not sure if I chose it.
And for you and Mon, what are the issues you facing Burlington? If you had to name them, what are the things that need to be addressed by your leaders, by other citizens? Give us a kind of synopsis, if both of you would, about your perspective about Burlington.
I would love to see more inclusion. I would love to see one Burlington. Right now, you got an east side, you got a west side, I would love to see more of a one Burlington. I would love to be able to ride from South Church Street all the way down to North Church Street and see the same thriving businesses, the same beautiful homes, the same attractions. I personally, to have lived here 38 years, I think my biggest concern with Burlington is just the division. When I'm on one side, I'm getting one view. But if I go a little further, I'm like, how are things still the same? And, I graduated in, 2001, went to school in the 90s, but why are things still the same? Why is my car still bumping and tires about to fall off on the same area that was like that as I was growing up? I just feel like it's so much more to offer, and I feel like we can do so much better together.
Awesome. It sounds like somewhere embedded in there was a question for our city manager, Hardin Watkins. Hardin, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit from your perspective about the tale of the two Burlingtons that DeJuana describes.
Sure. I'm Hardin Watkins, city manager here in Burlington. I've been here about 4.5 years. I work for the mayor and city council. And so the role of city manager is to run the city on a day-to-day basis on behalf of our elected officials. I supervise all of our department heads, including Chief Smythe, including the fire chief, et cetera, and have the help of 2 assistant city managers to do that. So again, my daily task is, again, the day-to-day administration of the city, trying to make sure I understand the city council's wishes and their policy goals and make sure those things get done. So my career, about 30 years in local government. I've been city manager in 3 different cities, one in suburban Atlanta, and then Garner, which is just south of Raleigh, before I came here 4.5 years ago. So, Dr. Lane, you want me to speak about
The tale of the two Burlingtons?
Yeah.
And your perspective about the lack of development and progress that our citizens cry and really lament about for East Burlington versus West Burlington?
Okay, thank you. That so what and I think that is something that obviously we're aware of, something that we are focused on, and something we want to make progress on. Quite honestly, I'll share with you, as part of the reason I was interested in coming to work here is to see how much potential there is for growth and how much potential there is for redevelopment in this community. You take a look at sites like the Western Electric. If we're going to, if our community is going to be all that it can be, we've got to figure out what to do with that site. And we could have a whole Zoom seminar just on what the plan is for Western Electric. So I won't get into the details of that, but be happy to answer questions. Peter Bishop is our economic development director for the city. And that was one of the goals the city council gave me, was to get an economic development program started for the city. We've hired Peter. We've hired a second person in economic development. And they're focused all day, every day on proactively trying to seek business opportunities and try to seek ways to improve our community. And I'll come back to that in a second. But I think Peter, as we recruited him to come here, we hired him away from Currituck County, where he was the economic development director there. Peter's interested in the same things I'm interested in, is that we saw so much potential. I think he's here for a lot of the same reasons I am. There's so much potential for what Burlington can be. And we want to be a part of that in sort of terms of a personal mission, which is to make your corner of the world a little bit better. And I think that's our goals. I think some of the things that we're focusing on economic development, which helps get to some of the questions DeJuana was asking about growing wages. How do we grow the wages here in the community? And that part of that is bringing better quality jobs, high quality jobs, bring plenty of jobs. Ultimately that's trying to create more discretionary income in the community, which I believe helps us solve lots of other problems that we have. We want to encourage business and industry. So the businesses that are here, we want to encourage them, help them figure out ways to grow, help them find new markets for their products, et cetera. For instance, as we speak today, we're doing a mask distribution giveaway at North Park, and those masks are all purchased locally from Burlington-based, some of our textile and clothing manufacturing companies. So the little things like that we're trying to do to promote ourselves, but we do bigger things like that, trying to encourage our business and industry. We're always looking and identifying and recruiting sustainable industry. We've got things we're looking at for redevelopment opportunities. We've also got things we're looking at in some of our newer areas. Out by the airport, obviously, is where we have large tracts of land, trying to attract some of the same kinds of industry that you keep see landing in Mebane in their parks. And we've got some plans together to build some parks like that, again, to try to bring jobs and bring income to the community. The other thing we do is try to encourage entrepreneurship. And so the businesses that are here, we've had a handful of folks who have sort of moved here from Orange County or moved here from Durham because they like our old buildings and want to do something creative in there, whether it's furniture making or 3D printing or t-shirts or ceramics. We've had luck with all of those sorts of things. Finding those entrepreneurs that have those jobs will stay with you longer and sort of grow into your community. We're really excited about trying to find more of those. And then basically just the overarching goal of our economic development program is trying to create a positive climate for business to thrive. So just anything we can do to help promote our businesses. So things that I haven't mentioned is obviously promoting our downtown and promoting our airport, because those are the things that help our businesses thrive and are trying to bring new business into town.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask Kathy to jump in here as well. And from the council's perspective, maybe talk a little bit to us about the way that you form your vision for the city and how our citizens can impact that vision. And specifically, when we talk about race relations, the Black community in Burlington, what are some of the ways, going back to DeJuana's point, that the city council will work to foster inclusion?
Thanks for having me, Prudence. I will try to answer that question. That's a very large one.
I know, sorry.
We've done a lot of planning over the last 4.5 years and before that as well, trying to come up with a vision for Burlington and the kinds of things that we want to see happen. And they are in that list that Hardin just said about economic development and those kinds of things. The piece of my personal vision, and I think that's probably the best way to approach it, is kind of a lift all boats kind of strategy, trying to go after the people who are struggling the most and find out what they need and then see how to provide it. Because that, when somebody is suffering, everybody is suffering, in my view. So housing is an issue, community policing is an issue, opportunities for learning and opportunities for the kinds of jobs that will pay a living wage. Those are all the initiatives that we have tried very hard to get a vision for. Some of the frustration, I hear this, and I have heard this for many, many years. And in fact, I was on the council in the 80s, and I heard this at that time as well. The whole issue of the kinds of businesses, I have someone who keeps asking me when there's going to be a Starbucks in East Burlington. And that there should be a Starbucks in East Burlington, because there are customers who would be happy to spend money on coffee. It's more than I want to spend, but people want that brand in their neighborhood. But we don't have any control over that. We have, those companies make those decisions based on market research, and market research leaves them thinking that couldn't be supported in East Burlington. I wish that I had more control over that. I do think that there should be a local entrepreneur who would open a coffee shop in East Burlington, which I think would be even better to have a local person who is making a business out of doing that. That's just one little piece of it. But the larger vision is that we want everybody to be treated the same. The color of your skin should not define you and define how you're treated in our city. That drives me crazy. It just drives me crazy. We have people of all colors in our city, and I'm really proud of our city because of the way we are, because we bring all those different people to the table to have the conversations. Some of the things that have happened in terms of policing, I just want to shout out to the chief about that. I've gone to all of the strategic planning meetings that the department has held as a part of their accreditation. And we get a lot of people who come out and talk about what it is they want to see in the police department. I'm not saying, I've had meetings where if I had 5 to 10 people show up, I would feel that I had a big success. I mean, I'm talking 60 to 80 people who show up from all walks of life. So it's not, I do think that we try for inclusion extremely hard. We We try to recruit people to be on boards. We try to recruit people to be on our committees. We can try to get people to do the police academy and the fire academy so they know what's going on. I think we really, our vision is that we be an inclusive community. If that's not happening, I would like to hear about it. If you wanted to participate in something, we only have so many positions on boards and commissions, but if you actively seek that, you can be engaged in what it is that we're doing in this city.
Thank you. And you provided a nice segue to Chief Smythe, who, by way of introduction, I'm going to ask to maybe talk a little bit about where he sees the BPD and also the state of his relationship or his agency's relationship with the community. Chief Smythe?
Yeah, great. Thank you. I appreciate being here and welcome to all the other panelists. And I'm excited about the opportunities tonight. And we've got a good sized audience to listen and participate and then ask questions, hopefully in a few minutes. And so I think we're in a good place. As Mayor Pro Tem Hykes mentioned, the Burlington Police Department is accredited. We've been accredited for 30 years. And that means we operate under national best practices for law enforcement, which puts us in a place where we follow the best and highest rules and we prove compliance with those things. And many of those things drive us to do, we do about 30 internal annual reports, and each of those annual reports from specific divisions or functions that we do have to-do lists that come with them every year, and we march through those, and that creates in us a learning, growing, thriving organization that's not status quo. It's constantly seeking to improve, and that's why we undertook the strategic planning conversations. Prior to 2015, I think all of the strategic planning here in the Burlington Police Department had been the command staff huddled around a conference table. We had a police community advisory board for many, many years. John Glenn formed that in the 90s. And they had some input, but not the robust community involvement that Kathy spoke about. So we've been doing that and including people in those engagements. And then in about 2014, I think we coined the term trust through transparency. And that's when we really kind of kicked the doors open and we said, come to our community police academy opportunities, come go on ride-alongs with us. We've formed our community response team, which are folks who are active in the community that help us understand what's going on in certain times in certain places. We form relationships with people like Mon and DeJuana, right? So I met DeJuana in 2016 after a particularly violent summer here in Burlington, and she arranged a peace march, stop the violence, and we went and marched. And that was my first introduction to her and her activism here in this community. And since then, we've formed just beyond count numbers of relationships with folks on all areas of Burlington. I've spent the last week and a half on the kind of talk circuit, right? The Episcopal Men's Coffee Group, the Kiwanis. I hit the Rotary in a couple of weeks, all talking now about police reform. And so I'm very excited that we see things crop up in police reform as kind of demands on the police. And I'm in a place for the Burlington Police Department where I say, well, yeah, we started that in 2016, or we've been doing that for the last 3 years. And so I believe that we're cutting edge. We're not perfect. By no means are we perfect. And we've got a lot of room to grow still. But we're on a path that positions us to listen and act. And so I do spend a lot of time listening and then a lot of time acting. And I'll leave it at that and say that we're ready to listen more and act more, not just starting tonight, not just last month, not last year, but for a long while now, we've been ready to listen and act. And the more people that come to the table, we're ready to listen and act.
Well, thank you to all the panelists for your remarks. I think we have quite a rich perspective or rich perspectives from all of you about our community, and the community also has questions for you. One of the questions that has been offered, and I think it is appropriate probably for Mayor Pro Tem Hykes, has to do with the availability of grants or funding. for some of the entrepreneurs, especially Black entrepreneurs, speak about to incentivize, to provide opportunities for them to operate or start and grow businesses in East Burlington?
I'm not completely familiar with the kind of funding that's out there, but I know that Peter Bishop is, or would be. And I know, I believe that the Chamber also has some funding available for young entrepreneurs that would be looking to get started. I think it's out there, and if people are interested in that, I think they should call the city and start with Peter, because I know he's been looking at some East Burlington businesses to get started, and working in collaboration with some realtors and some folks in the community who are interested in seeing those businesses start. So I would begin there.
Yeah, and you know, one of the things that has brought us all here to the forum is the fact that the way that structural racism operates in our nation really is really forcing us to reimagine the way that we do things. So what I'm struck by are the calls for people to come to council, participate on boards and commissions, and get involved. And I'm wondering if there are ways that the commission could go to the community, to our churches, to our schools, and actually inform and work with people who may be intimidated by even the local government process, and help them really get started.
Going to the church, in terms of an entrepreneurial initiative, is that what you mean? Or are you talking about having the boards and commissions go out into the community instead of being at City Hall? I wasn't sure.
Well, I was talking initially about going out and really nurturing the entrepreneurs in our community that are really just looking for opportunity, don't know where to start, and meeting them where they are. But I don't think that it would hurt for our city officials to also go out into the communities that, apart from election time, what people are thinking about, what they want from their officials and what their needs are as well.
Yeah, one of the things that I think has been the good part of COVID-19, and there's not much to recommend it, but we are thinking in different ways about how we connect, and getting together in person is not possible right now. So there are some ways for us to maybe get a bigger audience. I don't know, that's a good thing to explore, I think, right now while we're thinking about this, and hopefully we will be able to get together in person again. But for now, it might be a good way to involve a lot of people.
Okay.
Dr. Lane?
Yes.
Peter Bishop is on the call. He's on as an attendee. I don't know if you can.
We can unmute him to help him make a comment, and then we also have some other questions that are waiting in the. If participants want to ask them themselves, they can raise their hand. There's a way to do that, or they can type it into the Q&A portion.
So we do have a handful, and if we can get Peter in, he could give maybe more details. I don't know how much time you want to spend on that, but we've got some community development block grant funding that's coming, will be announced soon, that is only available for folks that are low to moderate income, either serving low to moderate income areas. And so that's a loan program. City Council allocated funds out of some of the CARES Act money we got through the federal government. We're also, I think the Alamance County is also working to try to set up through the Alamance Community Foundation some loans for businesses during the COVID that are impacted by COVID as well. So again, the trigger on both of those is COVID, some sort of COVID related impact. Peter also wanted me to mention that we're getting ready to kick off an economic development strategic planning process. We've got a lot of plans, as Ms. Hykes said. We've done a very extensive plan on the Western Electric property, we brought in a team of national experts. We got a grant from the American Institute of Architects. They brought in 5 or 6 architects from across the country. They gave us a super plan on how to redevelop that site. We worked really, really hard on that. Peter and his team led that effort for us. The challenge now is that land's in private hands, and we can't tell the private owner what to do with their land, but we've given them a wonderful plan to do that. So we try to do that on several different things. I know we've also got some loan money available on the Maple Avenue corridor. We did an extensive study in the Maple Avenue corridor a couple of years ago. We're continuing to apply for federal build grants, which is $25 million to redo that corridor. But in the meantime, the city has put money aside to help small businesses in the Maple Avenue corridor that want to do some facade improvements. So there's stuff out there. Our Economic Development Department can get folks linked in if they're interested in pursuing that.
Yeah, and I would also just remind you that not all the folks who live in Burlington are in Alamance County. Like I live in Burlington, but I live in Guilford County, for example. So we want to make sure that we don't cut folks off as well. All right, so I really want to get to the members of we have over 100 people here with questions. So I'm going to ask Ash to maybe help us begin moderating some of the conversation and the questions in the Q&A. And if any of the panelists have anything that they want to chime in on while we wait for some of those questions, feel free.
Sure. So I have a question here that asks about city planning. And this participant wants to know if there are some concrete plans for Burlington and what the measurable outcomes of those plans would be for city planning.
Ms. Hykes, you want me to start or would you like to begin?
Or belong in Burlington, I think would be the fit. But go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Okay, so again, the Western Electric redevelopment, I think the key to turning around that side of town is to do that. It's a complicated plan because again, we don't own the property, but we got a beautiful plan, a really strong plan that lays that out, and city council is willing to provide the zoning and infrastructure resources to get that turned around. So that plan does exist. Again, we've spent about a year and a half on the Maple Avenue corridor. And that plan obviously begins from the interstate and comes all the way into downtown. And again, that'll have ripple effects all over that side of Burlington. It's not just the corridor itself, but it would have ripple effects outside the corridor. Those are 2 that are top of our priority list, and they do have specific measurables. Like I said, we are working on our second application to the federal government for a $25 million grant to implement that Maple Avenue corridor study. We've actually got phone calls scheduled the 29th with USDOT, where we'll be pitching and advocating for that. We've got both members of Congress. Staff will be on the call with us advocating, so there are solid things happening on that. The city just adopted a new Unified Development Ordinance back in the fall, and so that got rolled out and went into effect October. And there was probably 2 or 3 years of work to get that done, and that's going to change the quality of development, and it opens up some flexibility for development all over the city. The other thing I'll share in our planning department, we've over the last 2 years made a much more robust proactive codes enforcement program to where we're trying to go in and work on homes proactively. We all realize, as Ms. Hykes said earlier, that the quality of some of our housing is really poor, and we need to do all that we can with all the tools that we have on the regulatory side to try to improve that. We've kind of revamped our staff, revamped our approach, so there are some solid concrete things happening. And again, we could do a whole Zoom seminar on the things we're trying to do on the planning and economic development side. Ms. Hykes,
We'll leave that for city council because we really want to focus on the other issues that our participants are really curious about. Ashley, do you have another question for us?
Sure. I have a question here. When Kathy mentioned inclusion and the number of seats available on committees, this person is wondering if the committees are set up so that there are a specific number of seats for each area of Burlington.
No, they are not. We do try to work on that and find people from all over the city, but that's certainly a place that we could improve. Lots of people also enjoy staying on committees for a number of years and a number of terms, and that sometimes gets to be a problem of inclusion, of trying to get some additional people to get an opportunity to do that. But yes, most of those committees are limited to the number of people who can serve.
So another question about the planning committee. Is there a planning committee for economic development? Was anyone from the Black community included? And what strategies are in place to help businesses sustain their businesses?
Hardin, I'm gonna ask to answer that.
Ashley, can you repeat that?
Sure thing. It's another question about the planning committees. This participant wants to know if there is a planning committee for economic development, and if members of the Black community were included, as well as what strategies were in place to help businesses sustain.
So I think as we do each of the plans, they each sort of have their own process. Like I said, the Western Electric study, I know definitely we had a lot of community participation and involvement, and it did include, you know, white members of the community, Black members of the community. We reached out to the Latinx members of the community. The same thing happened on the Maple Avenue corridor study. Again, we had a whole series of programs. We had a task force that was carefully, a steering committee that was carefully put together to be representative. That's sort of in our DNA of what we try to do, is to make sure we're trying to represent all segments of the community when we put together like a task force or a steering committee for those exact things. And again, especially when we're doing the planning efforts, we work really, really hard, challenge the consultants that we have on board to do a lot of outreach. Some have found even, you know, trying to get targeted surveys to the right kinds of folks. As Dr. Lane said, you've got to sometimes try to meet people where they are. Nobody's real excited about coming to a city hall and sitting around a conference table. That's not a lot of fun, but if you can find different ways to engage people, we're constantly looking for ways to do that.
Okay, I have a question here about if there are any plans to assist Blacks building wealth and to change their economic status long term.
That's another huge question right there. That, as we talked about at the entrepreneurial piece of it, no, I can't say that we have specific plans. Our whole economic development program is the emphasis there, or the vision, if you will, is that we will improve the wages of people in our community by going after industries that will pay a living wage. That's kind of our bottom line on the way we do that kind of development. That's a key piece. It reminds me of the information that I learned through the area. If I don't know if our listeners are aware of that group that has been doing racial equity training. And there is a groundwater introduction to what they're doing on Saturday, I believe, that the August the 1st, which is a good way to understand some of the history of why there's less home ownership among people of color than there are white people. There's a long, very sad structural reason why that has happened, and it's good for especially white people to hear. But I encourage people to listen to that if we want to just start from today, which I think is what we have to do, we're not starting over, but we're just saying, let's start today. I think that's something that I would like to hear more about, in ways that they think, that the listener thinks that we would be able to do something about that beyond what it is that we're already trying to do.
Kathy, I appreciate that, but it would seem that the council members need to reconsider their vision and not just about paying people better wages or jobs. When we're talking about building wealth, especially generational wealth, I think what people of color lack are the opportunities for investment, about home ownership, thinking about the number of things that they are precluded from because they're not propertied, for example, or they don't have a driver's license and don't own a car, so they're not then chosen for jury duty. So not having a jury of one's peers seems a little fruitless, and it all begins with ownership, right? So thinking beyond just like paying somebody $15 an hour or a livable wage, but really getting them into the entrepreneurial mindset and thinking about ownership, about investment in the stock market. Again, starting really young, thinking about our curriculum in schools, bringing that into ABSS. And Dr. Benson will join us later in the series. And these are questions that we certainly can ask him about, thinking about when you want to go into Truliant or Bank of America. Well, that's kind of more national, but some of our homegrown financial institutions, how can that be different? I also, I appreciate all the questions coming, but I really do want to get Chief Smythe into the conversation a bit more, because what our listeners need to know are that our chiefs were the ones who really wanted to have a platform to engage with the community after the George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor incidents. And because of COVID and not being able to meet safely in a physical space, I had offered to maybe do this online forum. And so I give him credit, and others as well, for really wanting to come and engage with the community. And over the next several weeks, members of our different municipalities will be here as well. And I'll put those onto our online platforms and social media pages. But Chief Smythe, if you would, Hardin and Kathy talked earlier about making sure Burlington is attractive for investment, but we also want to make sure it's attractive and safe for our residents, and that interactions with our police are not only civil but friendly. So I had a question for you about the number of our BPD officers that actually live in Burlington. Do you by any chance know?
I don't have the exact number, Prudence, I apologize, but I can tell you it's relatively small. And that comes down to really an equation of, home buying power, that if we, the starting salary for a police officer is about $38,000. And if they're going to buy a house and they have their choice to buy it out in the county or buy it in the city, they get a much bigger house if they buy that out in the county. It's not that they maybe don't want to live in the city, but they can't get the same size house for their family. And so they're not generally living in the city of Burlington. They're generally living somewhere else. And that's a shame, because the true tenets of community policing, which exist, you want to be here, right? You want to shop local, buy local, send your kids to the local school and be able to visit them at lunch, and those kinds of things are all healthy for us to do. But not a lot of that happens, just because I think it's not purely, but it's primarily driven by the real estate market.
Well, that seems like a issue that maybe City Council can also pick up, not just about incentivizing ownership and entrepreneurship among our Black residents, our communities of color, but also about encouraging and offering ways for our local law enforcement to be invested in the communities where they are policing.
Yeah, certainly there are models, I think, around the country that do that. There are some that exist through first-time home buying, but they're precluded for second person or second home purchases by people. And sometimes they're limited and come with a lot of strings about buying a home and not selling it for so many years and redeveloping and those kinds of things. So, but if there was a program that was open to everybody about, maybe it's a property tax deferral for police officers to live in the city or some other opportunity that would encourage or incentivize them to be here, I think that would certainly be something we're willing to look at.
Good. Ashley, what else do we have?
So we have a question about the Burlington Police Department and what their statistics might tell us about the fairness of citywide policing for all population groups.
Yes, I saw that question in the queue there, and I was trying to figure out how I would answer that, but it's so broad with just saying the data, right? So we collect traffic stop data, we collect arrest data, we collect use of force data, and those are a few of the annual reports that we complete every year, and those are available to the public. In the last couple of weeks, I've had some requests, and I think we'll do a better job here in the next few weeks of just putting them up online, so they're on our webpage, and you can go and look at those at your leisure rather than having to request them from me. They'll be available. And if you don't mind, I'll dovetail that into one of the other questions that was there, and that was about de-escalation. That's probably one of the most common questions that I get asked these days. And I'll share with you very proudly that we adopted a national model that was created by PERF, the Police Executive Research Forum. It's called ICAT, Integrating Communications, Assessment, and Tactics. And we adopted that national best practice model in 2016. And in 2016 and 15, 16, we were averaging 50 or 60 uses of force per year. And through that de-escalation model, we're now down to an average of about 25 uses of force per year. So we've cut in half our use of force over 4 years. So I think that's a terrific gain. And that means that the police are safer and the public's safer. The level of trust, prudence, as you indicated, right? How do we trust each other and interact with each other? I mean, I think that's enhanced by that decrease in use of force. And the perception of that is something that we try to communicate regularly and make sure we communicate. And Ashley, there was a second half to that question. Do you remember what it was?
I believe it's asking if you could envision cities and towns hiring more mental health experts that can be
perfect. So again, that's a program that we
deployed
started
to handle it.
Yeah, in 2016, we onboarded on the city's dime a mental health worker, law enforcement crisis counselor, and we've been doing that now for 4 years, and that's a co-responder who can hop in a police car and go on a mental health call, go on an involuntary commitment. And I think the question is about what do I envision, and I'll tell you, I envision that there be a county-wide unit of counselors that work about 18 hours a day that are available to all of the police departments, and we call them and they come with us, right? Whether it's in Hall River or Elon or Burlington or on down at Southern High School, right? Wherever it's going to be, they're going to hop in the car and go and assist us. The question inferred that we're not well trained on mental health, but most of the agencies in Alamance County are at about 100% training for the crisis intervention team training, which is a 40-hour class. Burlington's a lot bigger, so I'm at about a 70% saturation rate for that. So out of my 70 or so patrol officers, not many don't have it yet, but we're working in that direction. So we've got pretty good skills, but being augmented by a civilian crisis worker is a fantastic step in the right direction.
Okay, I have another question here that asks if the city uses a racial equity impact assessment when they are assessing programming and policies, and how does this needs and possible impact to systemically marginalized communities when determining different programming and policies?
I don't, first of all, I didn't really hear the whole question, Ashley, because you broke up for me? Could you try it again?
Sure. So the question asks, does the city use a racial equity impact assessment when they are assessing programming and policies?
Nothing that's actually called that. I don't know. That sounds as though that is something, a specific kind of test that you use, and I'm not familiar with it.
Are there any other ways that the city identifies the needs and possible impact to systemically marginalized communities when they create programming and different policies?
I don't know. Hardin, you want to take a stab at that?
And again, so there's a lot of, I'm not certain of hearing those terms used together like Ms. Hykes, but what I will say is that each council member obviously takes my job is to present proposals on behalf of the staff, give guidance, give recommendations to our elected officials. And I will say that each of them carefully considers each item that's presented to them and thinks about their life experience, their life journey, their what they've heard from their constituents, their beliefs about how to best govern, and makes decisions. And I will say, for the 5 folks that we have on our city council today, they all do that from a very heartfelt manner. They do that using their whole life's, again, experiences and things they're trying to do. They're fair-minded folks. They're kind, good folks. And again, I don't know the specific tools, but I think they are trying to think about all the folks who were not in the room when they're making a decision, as you would expect any strong governing body to do.
So Hardin, one of the things I think that we would want to have council consider is, it's not about being kind and well-intentioned. And when one's life experiences are limited and your perspectives are limited, then that will limit the ways in which you can address all members of your community. So really getting those voices, I think, in the room and thinking about the specific tools and instruments that can actually help people, irregardless of their backgrounds or their kindness or their intent, think about racial equity is what that question was really driving at.
Yes, yes. Thank you for piggybacking off of that. That's exactly what I was thinking of. That's why it's so important to know your city councilmen, to know the people that are in power, because you want to know that those people are representing you. It's hard for me to be in a seat and say wholeheartedly that I know what it's like to be white. I'm Black. I can imagine I have white friends. I have, people that I love who are white, but I'm not white. I don't, my everyday life of being Black is totally different. So that's why it's important to have the people that you're trying to serve, the ones you're trying to reach, they must be in the room in order to get those things accomplished. They have to come to the table too. And I think that's when I started about inclusion. If you're having a conversation about a particular group, let's just make sure they're in the room. Yes, I may work with them. Yes, I may stay beside them, but it's different when you ask their opinion on a subject and when you in the room talking about something that will affect their whole family, and they're more vulnerable, and you will learn more about a person that you maybe didn't even think through your job or think through just seeing them in the grocery store. So that's that inclusion part. It's hard to speak for East Burlington if nobody's in the room to speak for it. This is the most time that I posed the question on Facebook, because the one thing I wanted mine and I to do as representatives of the community is we have an idea, we're out there, we're on the front line, but let's give them opportunities to say what they would like to talk about during the meeting tonight. And as you guys have heard, it's been a lot about, ownership, redevelopment. That's been the main question. We haven't even got to race yet. So I think that in itself, it was heartfelt to me on my Facebook post, and it's heartfelt now because race hasn't even been an issue. It's just more of opportunities. How can I speak for myself and my family? How can I be in the room with you? And I think for Burlington officials, you guys should feel good. We're going through civil unrest, and your citizens are not asking about you know, they're being targeted. It's not all negative. It's all the things they want to hear from you is just about how to make themselves better. How can we make our community better? How can you give us the resources to do better? And what is going to be better? I think that is a big deal. So when it posed the question of Burlington, are we united? I think a large part, I think we came a long way. And I think these questions are definitely examples. And I'm sorry, I didn't want to jump in, but.
Oh, please, no, jump in, jump. And Mon, you jump too, because I want, you know, we've talked about the equity part, but we need to dig in to the racial part about why after 51 years in the Burlington riots of 69, we're still looking at a city quite divided, at least geographically and racially as well.
Well, it's
And
hard
we're-
to understand
yeah.
what you necessarily don't impose. You don't interject yourself in. You have councilman, when you sit on the committee, it's one thing to throw out stats, and it's one thing to say you want to make change, but it's one thing to know what you want to make change and know the people that you want to make change for. You have to put yourself in that situation. You have to get out and you have to know the areas that you want to make change in. The people, you have to see the people that you want to help and the people that you want to make that you want to help with the financial equality, racial equality, and everything. Those people in the committee, even the people in the community, they have to know the people that sit and speaking to them and for them, and the people that speaking for them has to know the people. You know, it's one thing to throw out stats, but we can throw out these same stats every 1 to 4 years because it's the same thing. But to actually bring change, you have to step over that line, that same line, because that narrative,
I like that.
it's the same thing each year. But to actually bring change, you have to step over that line. The city council has to get their feet dirty. They have to get your hands dirty a little bit. You have to do like Chief Smythe. He comes out into his community. He looks at his black people. He talks to his black people. I'm not an activist. I'm not a leader. I'm just one of the people that grew tired and grew eager of what was going on and wanted to have dialogue with people in the community that necessarily that represents me, that can arrest me, that could help me in any kind of way. But as a black community, we don't do that. You know, we're not coming to the police. We don't do the committees, and we don't mobilize the vote the way we should. But for those who throw out stats and say that we're trying to do this, you have to cross that line. You have to talk to me. You have to talk to the ones that need change, that desires change, because I desire change, and I'm the regular guy at the barbershop. I'm the regular guy you see at the store. I'm not an activist in anything, but I am very tired of how things are as far as we're just a stat, and we're more than a stat. We're a human being and people that desires change, and those who sit in those seats in those, you know, the committee, they need to recognize that and cross that line and open that dialogue. I give the mayor, Ian, and police the Smythe so much credit for their efforts in the community. It makes a complete difference when that barrier is broken down of
Absolutely.
where the communication, where I feel like he's my friend now. I feel like the chief of police, and I thought I would never say that, is my friend, you know. I tell people that now, but it is for that comfort, and this is what the black community needs. This is what we need. We need to have that comfort to where we have someone representing us. We have someone in the best interest for us to see what's going on. And Burlington is very diverse, but we're also broken. We're broken at the seams in so many ways and in so many parts but we need healing, but it only starts at the head. You know, we can talk all we want to, and we want to help, but we have to have that dialogue. We have to know who we're talking to, and we have to know what we're talking about in order to really help. You know what I'm saying?
And Mon, in case nobody told you, you are now a bona fide activist. So you can stop saying that because it doesn't make it any less true. And you know, and what you said, a lot of people like to get to the reconciliation, but you get to the truth first and the truth telling. And you just dropped a lot of truth on us. And I'm curious about, like, what if you told your 16 and 22-year-old children about the state of the world and their city?
Have hope, still believe. The way it is now is not the way it's going to play out. Change is coming. Change is going to happen. So do your due diligence and being the person you are. And I always say this: be the change that you want to see. And I try to tell them that you have to be open-minded, open-hearted, and I just tell them to keep faith. But you can't buy. Don't play into a stereotype. Don't listen to what the media tells you. Talk to your friends, talk to your pastors, and just be the same person you want to interact with. You be that same person every day that you want to meet. That's what I tell my sons. I mean, because right now, the way of the world and the way and easy, you can log on to Facebook, you can cut on the TV, and it can change the way your heart is. It can change the way your mind is. It can change your outlook so quickly. And I never want that to happen and to my kids and in my house, but it could. But through my dialogue with them and through our conversations, I just don't want to change their heart and anything like that. But we're an open-minded family, and I try to keep it that way. Like I said, because we live in a diverse world and we're a diverse family. Like I said, my kids are mixed, so I try to keep that in them. I just try to instill that in them, that the world is what you make it, but it also you have to be the change that you want to promote.
Prudence, could I react to what DeJuana and Mon said?
Please.
Because it's very, it's a change for me in terms of thinking. What I'm hearing are different issues than what I have been focused on. My main focus has been youth solutions, I would say, was at the top of my list. And that was what the initiative that we started to react to the youth violence that was happening in our city. And we took a lot of measures, including hiring a person whose responsibility is solutions to what kinds of things need to be available through our city for youth so that they have more success and they have opportunity. And the other thing of mine has been code enforcement and also neighborhood development, looking at the Morrowtown task force that I've been involved in. Those are initiatives that I feel have given me insight into, I can have conversations with people and I can find out what people are thinking about what is happening. It's very much engaged me. And other council members as well. I love having that access to people that I may not see every day, but I will see once a month and have that interchange to find out what they're thinking about what's going on. So you're raising a valid point, but and the idea that you're looking at other issues like the racial equity assessment, and you're looking at building wealth in the Black community or the people of color. Those are issues that I have not focused on because frankly, I was busy doing the other things, but I really value your input there. And it's helpful to me to know that that is the direction that you would like to see us go.
And thank you for speaking on that. And respectfully, with your background being a teacher, thank you for your service. I think I was told many years ago that you were a teacher. So I know education is.
Now, I've never been a teacher. I was on the school board.
Oh, okay.
That may be
I
why.
knew it was something with education. So I know education and children
Yes.
are near and dear to your heart. So I could definitely see how you would want to start with that initiative. And we're not saying it's a bad initiative, but we just know that we can't stay there. Like that Morrowtown task that you mentioned, Henry Caruth and I, that's actually our baby. He and I were partnered, and it was so much going on in Morrowtown, and nobody was doing anything. So I would actually like to adopt the Morrowtown task force and take it other places, because how that task force started was Mr. Henry and I went door to door. We started the conversation. What is going on? What's happening? We're here. How can we help? We're concerned. We, worked with First Presbyterian, got the cross planted there, had a few ceremonies to promote unity. And then the main thing they wanted in that area was to be able to take care of themselves. So we suggested the neighborhood watch type program. Let's use some of those old things that we already know that works. Let's go ahead and use that to protect your area. It's your property. Many people there actually even own their property in that area, and they care about what was happening. But to see 3 years later, I had just had my little girl, and to see 3 years later that groundwork that we did from talking to the community, now they're thriving and they have the Morrowtown force. They're taking care of themselves, and that was the whole point of what me and Mr. Henry was doing. But if we, like the same way he and I moved on, you got to get it going and then move on. It will always forever be personal to me with the Morrowtown. That's why it was so good to go back there and to have your support on painting the banner there. Because a little part of me feels like that is my home. But we just can't stay in those places. We have to go ahead and go on to the next issue. Stay out there, finding out what's going on in real time, what these issues are, because every day they're changing. They're changing. And once something and like the Morrowtown task force, that's successful. It's 3 years later and it's successful. I was talking to someone out there last Sunday. Why can't every area that's in need have this same task force? It worked. Children are safer. Let's take it other places that don't have that guidance and don't have that protection and that safety in their area, but however, still keep addressing the other issues that are going on in the city.
But
so thank you for being a part of that.
But you did that, DeJuana. You stepped up and did that. And that's what I'm saying. I don't know that it can all come from the city. It has to come from residents in the area.
Yes. Yes.
We certainly help whenever we can, but it has to come from the neighbors.
You're right.
And unfortunately, like Henry and I didn't live there. You know, I live in Graham now. He lives in Graham, or past Graham. But something, it's not, you know, I would say resident, because the neighbors didn't know how. The people that was living there, it was continuing. I think it's 2 unsolved murders in that area, and nobody had did anything. They were hopeless. They felt like one particular neighbor had just taken over the whole thing, and they were just best just to sit back and be quiet and don't say anything, even though they worked 40 years to take care of their house and pay it off. Then they in there afraid and scared to even say anything about it. So it took 2 people that wasn't even in the neighborhood to come in. And yes, I'm with you with definitely it's going to take the community to take care of the community. Whether they're neighbors or not, I think just good people doing the right thing. If more of us would come to you guys, if more of us would stand up and find the right way to go and voice your concern, even if it's not your area, it's not your community. And we're speaking of Burlington, one Burlington, then it has to be one Burlington. It doesn't matter if you're on that side. If something's not right on that side and you get a whiff of it, stand up for it. Only way to have a one Burlington is to first have it in our minds that we're in one Burlington. That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. Ashley, I want to get to at least one more question.
Sure. So this is a question for Mon and DeJuana. It says, if there's one thing you could see change in Burlington Alamance, what would it be? Like one concrete change that you want to see happen in your communities.
In Burlington and Alamance? That's a good question. Ma, I'm gonna let you start with that one. So I'm gonna let you start.
Wow.
I can't.
That is a. I mean, we should have started that an hour ago, but but as of right now, we need to talk. We need to have better communications on so many other levels. On the personal level, as far as family, friends, community. We also need a board and a committee that talks for everyone and not just for their friends and they're the ones that they see in their communities who they identify with. I don't agree with how a lot of things are structured in Alamance County from the head up, as far as who speaks for us, as far as our taxes, as far as how our money is allocated in our schools, how it is, like in, for instance, Graham, they have stricken down so many things as far as from their community things, from their programs for kids to the senior citizens to the Special Olympics. They're cutting a lot of things that the community didn't know about. It wasn't voted. It wasn't noted to the community or known by the community until it was voted on and printed. So I think a lot of things starts there. It's one thing to represent me. I don't think it's one person in Alamance County sitting on a committee right now that has any concerns of mine that views any of my concerns the same way I do. I really don't. And that's an issue. That is a major issue to me. That how am I paying taxes in a city, in a county that doesn't even have my well-being or anything that I think of for my community in interest, no interest at all. And I think it starts there, but I still have hope. Like I said, Police Chief Smythe, he gives me a lot of hope. Ian gives me a lot of hope with certain things, but we need to vote. We need to vote as a community, but we also need to put people in place that has the whole community, Black, white, whatever it may be, that interest in hand. And I think once we get those seats and once we get those people implanted, I think that we can grow as a community and as a city, as a county. We could be a whole lot tighter. We could be a whole lot better once we get those, because right now we have ideas that's been ingrained, that we're still holding dear to us 50 years later. And we're 50 years down the road now. So we can't hold true to those ideals and those ideas because we're not the same community. We're not the same people. We've changed and we need change. And I think it starts like I said, it starts at the head. And we need to put those people in place that has those views, that does not have these backwoods, these old ideas and these old ideologies that does not represent the community in whole. And I
Thank you, Mon. Thank you, Mon. I think you hit several other topics. And for me as a resident, it's sad to think of Burlington. It's sad that I have two visions. I have two visions in my head. Even though Burlington is in Alamance County, I look at Burlington as totally separate. I look at Burlington as progressive. I look at Burlington as safe. I look at Burlington as, home and a good place. And then if I go 2 miles down the road and I think about Alamance County as a whole, and I think about Graham, I'm totally divided. That to me is scary. That to me is where the work needs to be done. I would love to one day see one Alamance County. I would love for me to be able to say I have the same respect for the police chief and the city manager and the county manager, you know, in every area in Alamance County. I think the respect, the dialogue, if we could have that in other areas of Alamance County, we would be great. And if we pull together and pull the power and the weight of the entire Alamance County together, I can see great things. But today, you know, I don't see Alamance County as a whole. In my standpoint, us in Alamance County and Burlington is just divided. You know, I back the blue in Burlington. I trust the blue in Burlington. It's a mutual respect. But when you think of Alamance County and to be a woman of color and to be speaking on race and equality, we are so far behind as Alamance County as a whole than we are in Burlington, if that even makes sense.
Okay.
No accountability as a county. You know, definitely divided, definitely no respect. I can call Chief Smythe. I've called Mr. Watkins. I've emailed, called. I know that my concerns are going to be addressed, and they're going to be addressed in truth, and they're going to be addressed in concern. You know, when we call other leaders in Alamance County, you get told, you know, if you don't like it, you know, if you hate America, leave.
Heartbreaking.
We have only just begun to scratch the surface of all of this. Next week, we are talking about funding, dismantling, or defending police. And we will have some more young activists with us. We will have Chief Caldwell from the Mebane Police Department, and we will have the Executive Director of Emancipate NC here with us to continue to delve into these issues. I want to thank you, Mon Holmes. I want to thank you, DeJuana, Warren-Bigelow. I want to thank you, Chief Smythe, you, Mayor Pro Tem Hykes, and you, City Manager Hardin, for joining us. Please, back again and again. We will unmute you. And join the conversation. We are aware that we had lots of questions and that the conversation doesn't end here. What we do is to try to assemble those into maybe an FAQ, have some of our panelists and leaders respond in writing or however they can to the community and begin sharing that so that we keep the conversations going. Thank you to our technical support, Dallas Smith and Ashley Tatum, one of our future teachers, all the way up Rhode Island, for joining us for the first series, the first segment of the CoRE. And I wish everybody a really wonderful evening. Thank you all for tuning in.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Thank you for the audience. Thank you for allowing me to be on here. But also thank you for giving us the venue and the avenue to actually to state these things, because right now it's an uncomfortable conversation to have across the board, regardless if it's financial, diversity, the injustice. it's a very uncomfortable, but we have to answer these questions. We have to have this dialogue. In order to change, we have to cross this road. We have to meet in the middle somewhere, and we have to come to an understanding that it's time for a change, but we all must change. We all must come to an understanding, and we have to answer, and we have to deal with these uncomfortable issues in this community and in the nation. We do. And I appreciate everyone for tuning in, the questions, and Prudence, really thank you for the night to give us this to talk about these issues, really.
And you know, the way we get rid of the discomfort, practice. So
yes.
keep practicing.
Yes.
Let's keep talking. Thank you.
Thank y'all. Thank y'all.